Okay, good evening, everyone. Be starting momentarily. Just make sure everything is set up properly. Okay, to sama sambuddhasa namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. So we're talking about the 10 Samyojanas, and we've done in the last 3 weeks, we went through the lower three fetters, which are overcome by the Sotapanna, the stream winner. So now we're going to spend 2 sessions talking about the middling fetters, that is sense, desire, and ill will, that apply to the that it still remain for the Sotapanna, but are attenuated for the Sakadagami and overcome by in Theravada Buddhism. We have a system of 4 stages of enlightenment, each of which is a progressive experience of nibbana, the unconditioned. The stream enterer, Sotapanna, has got the first, or he has had the first glimpse of nibbana, of the unconditioned. So this purifies the view. This is the main feature of stream entry. The view is purified. There's no longer, as we discussed, there's no longer any uncertainty about the path. There's no longer any possibility of falling into false views like eternalism or annihilationism, firmly established at that point. Texts tell us that a Sotapanna is on his way out of samsara. He's entered the stream, so which is an image of a flowing in one direction. There's no going back. And a Sotapanna can have a maximum of 7 more lifetimes, but then he's on his way out. He's going to become an arahant at the longest stretch in 7 lifetimes. Sakadagami is the next stage of enlightenment, and that means once returner. There's a further deepening of the experience of nibbana, and the hold of some weakened may have just, so he's called a once returner. Now at that stage, the 2 fetters of sensual desire and ill will are attenuated, but they're not eliminated. This makes it more difficult to diagnose the veracity of the experience. It's difficult to know for sure. Unlike a stream winner, where the fetters are completely eradicated. So if one understands what the fetters are, one believes he or she has attained to stream entry, the advice is given to examine the mind not just once and not just casually, but deeply and repeatedly, to see that the less clear fetters of sense, desire, and ill will are weakened or attenuated, but not completely eliminated. That means they can no longer obsess the mind, they can no longer lead one astray, but they can still arise, they can still occur in the mind. So it becomes a bit more problematic to to be certain. But nonetheless, that's the definition. In the suttas, we have a fair bit of discussion about Sotapanna and about Arahant, but there's very little mention except in usually just in the list of the four of Sakadagami. It's not really discussed in any depth. So is considered to be part of the Kama Bhumi, the sphere of sense experience. This is a very broad and complex level of existence. It includes the lower realms, such as hell realm, ghost realm, and animal realm. It includes the human realm, and it also includes the first 6 levels of devas. So the devas, too, are within the sense realm, the sense desire or sense experience realm. That means that for all those beings in that realm, from animals, humans, devas, and so on, their primary experience, physical sense, is also dominant. That most of what we think about or feel or imagine is based upon sense experience. And it dominates our consciousness at this level of existence. And it serves as a motive for most beings to seek out pleasant sense experience and avoid unpleasant sense experience. Now, sense desire, the lust or thirst for pleasant sense experience, is anchored to Kama Bhumi. In the Brahma realms, they're beyond sense desire. And sense experience for them is limited only to the functional senses of sight and hearing. And they do not desire experience through the senses. Their pleasure is entirely internally generated. It's basically jhanic. It's rapture and bliss. And for humans, we can experience a taste of that state of being in jhana, where we transcend temporarily the clutches of the sense desire realm. But in our ordinary day-to-day existence, we're in this realm of existence. And it becomes a fetter, is fetters into this particular level of existence. Sense desire can be overwhelming, or it can be very slight, and it's tied up with the factor of Vedana, feeling, pleasant feeling, which is a mental state, but we seek to acquire pleasant feeling through the senses. If there are many different objects of sense that a person can desire, the obvious ones are food and sex, but there's many others that we like, pleasant tastes. So think about any, and you ask yourself, why do I desire this thing? In the last analysis, is always because you believe that it will give you pleasant feeling, sukha vedana. And often it does. Our sense experience generates a sukha vedana, a pleasant sense experience. But it's impermanent, it's never fully satisfying, and it's ultimately empty. Those are the three characteristics. The problem with desiring the desires of for sense objects is that it can never be satisfied. It can only be temporarily we can find a moment of happiness. There's no permanent beings in the world, human beings, animals, dewas, we're all of us caught up in that web of sense desire. And it's very difficult for beings even to imagine not having sense desire. That's one of the advantages of experiencing jhana, because you can experience a state of mind beyond sensuality, and then you can understand the ordinary sense realm better because you have a point of comparison. But beings are addicted to sense experience, sense desire, and very hard for them to give it up or to imagine even wanting to give it up. There's as he says to his listeners, you've seen in the marketplace, there's a leper who sits and begging in the marketplace, and his limbs are covered with weeping sores. And he keeps beside him a little brazier of red hot coals. And every now and again, he gets a pair of tongs and removes one of these red hot coals and presses it into one of his sores. It sterilizes, cauterizes the sore and gives him momentary relief from suffering. Now, do you imagine if he was to be miraculously cured and to stand up and walk away clean and whole with his leprosy gone, do you think he'd ever feel miss his red hot coals? Probably not. And the weeping sores are the sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, ears, and body. And the hot coals are sense objects of desire. And when one contacts a sense organ with a desirable sense object, there's a momentary relief. But if a person were to be enlightened and transcend the desire for sense objects, then he would regard it the same way as the cured leper regards the hot coals. And that the desire for sense objects is a predominant part of our psychology at this level of being, but it's not ultimately fundamental to our being. We can transcend it. It's not something that is fixed for all time. And in jhana, we can experience a state beyond it temporarily, and with the second stage of enlightenment, Sakadagami, we can attenuate it or weaken it to a very great degree, so it becomes less problematic. And only at the stage of anagami is it completely transcended permanently and done away with. One the worst fetter is sakayaditi, the sense, the cognitive sense of a self. And there's a higher or deeper sense of self that called asmimana that's overcome by the anagami, and we'll get to that, talk about that in a subsequent lecture. But there's also at least one mention of an intermediate sense of self that is still present for the Sakadagami, or still present for the Sotapanna, and is greatly reduced for the Sakadagami, and that is the sense of self based on sensuality, which is not a cognitive thing, doing the world, but kind of selfishness. An example I like to give to clarify this is the Sotapanna no longer believes in me, but he might still feel the desire to take the last cookie off the tray for me. There's still that more primordial desire based kind of reference to the self as wanting to experience sense objects. And this is pretty much done away with for the Sakadagami. So I'll stop there, and we'll have a look at the chat now and see what I can deal with for questions here. Okay, there's a few questions popped in already. PSA, you said beings are addicted to their sense desires. It's something I intellectually state of it's very, very difficult to overcome that nagging of the sense desires. One thing that can help is to periodically take the 8 precepts. So basically a fast from sense objects for a day or for a few days, and completely withdraw from objects of desire. And that can help to weaken that. Next one. Let's say a layperson or novice monk achieved anagami or arahant is still obliged to do his duties and bow to other higher ordained monks, taking the pala as to know abhidhamma and all. Okay. First question. It was kind of 2 questions there. The first one is if a layperson or novice monk achieved a state of enlightenment, anagami or arahant, yes, he's still obliged to bow to senior monks. The order of seniority is based solely on time of ordination. That has nothing to do with stage of enlightenment. And the stages of enlightenment are it's a personal thing, and it's not generally spoken of openly. It's actually a vinaya offense for a monk to speak about his own states of attainment to lay people, and even amongst other monks, circumspect about it. It's not something that does Anagami Arahant have to know Abhidhamma? No, some are learned and some are not. That's a separate thing. And he really feels there's no necessity for him to justify the stage he's in. He's either in that stage or not. And also that idea that you would have to prove your state of attainment by answering according to Abhidhamma, that's a dangerous concept, because someone could just be very clever and memorize Abhidhamma and be able to come up with the so-called correct answers without any attainment at all. If it was about a dream he had when he was a young monk, that he was in the forest and he came across the rotten log, and he walked across the log, and at the end was a Tipitaka case, a box with glass doors that held all the scriptures. You often see those in monasteries in Asia. And he tried to open it, but it was locked and he couldn't open it. And he interpreted the dream as follows. He said, the walking on the rotten log is based on a pun in Thai, that the word for rotten log is close to the word for last life. He said so. He had the intuition that this would be his last life, that he would attain. Why the case was locked for him. Is the Iti Wuttaka an earlier version or later version? I believe it's quite early. The language seems to indicate that it's a quite early text. Do arahants keep meditating on a regular basis, or they stop meditating after the goal has been achieved? Well, they would have no need for striving, but I think they would be in basically a state of meditation permanently, in some sense. But we do have the example of the Buddha, that he talked about after he became the Buddha. He talked about sometimes practicing jhana. Um, for example, in his last year, when he was in physical pain, he would enter jhana pain. Set of questions to know if it being his jhana or not, same for Magapala. Um, I don't believe so. I've never seen that expressed in that way. I don't think that it's quite as easy to diagnose. Are thinking pleasant thoughts also indulging in sense desire? Uh, yes, because I'm assuming the pleasant thoughts are based on sense objects. Um, if there is purely mental pleasure that comes from meditation, this is the rapture and bliss of jhana that is not based on sense desire. But most of our pleasant thoughts are about imagined or remembered sense objects. Our fed things occur separately. It's pretty much the same thing that happens uh, together. Now, the fetters are only really broken at the stages of enlightenment, but uh, we can bring that closer. We can work towards it by knowing what the fetters are and recognizing them and trying to reduce them in our mental state. But we can never really completely eliminate them until we reach the equivalent stage of enlightenment. Is it stated in the suttas or anywhere that an anagami must know and a prerequisite to enter Nirodha Samapatti? Um, I'm not. I'm not dead sure if that's in the suttas or it's a later commentarial discussion. But but honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not dead sure if that's an original sutta or if that's commentary. Next one. Also, is Sakaya Ditti best understood as a wrong cognitive view or wrong view with regards to the body as self respectively? No, it's not to. It's not to do with the body specifically, although it can be, but it can be any of the aggregates. The kaya in Sakaya Ditti with, is not necessarily referring to the physical body. Kaya just can mean, and more generally, just an aggregate or a formation. Like we say in English, we say a body of knowledge. It's not the physical body. Um, so Sakaya Ditti literally translates as own body view or my body view. Um, so it's and the Buddha talked about 20 ways in which Sakaya Ditti can manifest, relating to the five aggregates, taking each aggregate as either the body, I am the body, or the body is mine, or I am in the body, or the body is in me. and the same with feelings, and so on. So any of the five aggregates can be the basis for Sakaya Ditti. Bhante, I remember seeing that previous Buddhas were very tall. Is this the case? Were previous humans with higher lifespan taller than current humans? Well, there's some different takes on that. Um, uh, there's a problem in the regarding the size of the Buddha that comes from I think a confusion in the text that even the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, some people who take a very literal reading of the text believe he was 18 feet tall. Um, and that comes from actually a Vinaya discussion about the proper size of robes, and the measurement is called the Sukata span. A span is in English, old in English, they used to call it a cubit. It's the distance from the elbow to the fingertip, roughly. That's a cubit or a span, and in the measurements for robes, they talk about a sugat span as being 3 times an ordinary span, and that's been extrapolated from a unit of measure to saying that the Buddha was 3 times as high as a normal human. I don't think that could possibly be true. We do have stories in the suttas where people, including King Ajatasattu at one point, sees the Buddha at a distance amongst other monks and wonders which one is the Buddha. And if he was 18 feet tall, there wouldn't be any problem in recognizing which one was the Buddha. Is it true that Buddha's knowledge is vast as the forest and what he was told merely single leaves of knowledge? And that's exactly what he claimed. He said that directly to the monks at one point, that my knowledge is like the leaves in the forest, but what I share is like this single leaf in my hand. Ajahn, I am traveling to Thailand soon to visit Wat Pah Nanachat and other Buddhist sites. Do you have any advice on how to make the most of my trip? My first trip to a Buddhist country. Oh, I hope you have a good experience. I would suggest, first of all, get out of Bangkok as quickly as you can. I think you'll have a much more pleasant experience up country. If you can learn a few words of Thai, that would be good. That's helpful. You won't find a lot of people able to speak English in Thailand. And you want to try and accommodate yourself to the local culture and customs, not stand out as the rough barbarian foreigner. Ajahn, does visualizing giving away gifts like flowers and sunshine from the heart and metta bhavana count as sense desire? That's a good question. I would say not generally, or if it is in some kind of abstract way, if it a sense object like a flower or sunshine, it's a very refined kind of sense object. And that's another thing in general I think we need to clarify about sense desire and sense objects, that they're on a spectrum from coarse to refined. You can see that with the different Dewa realms, that they're all sense desire realms, but they become increasingly refined and subtle. Uh, and the more subtle, refined kinds of sensuality are uh, less damaging to the spiritual path. There's still ideal is to be transcend them altogether, but the more refined kinds are less. They don't drag the mind down into the mud as much. Um, I have, talking about this, I have tried to use an analogy from music, but I get myself in trouble because people have different musical tastes. But a general principle, we can see that all music is a form of sensuality, but there's the lower forms that are based on repetitive, loud, heavy beat. You then there's more refined kinds of music like classical or baroque or Gregorian chants that are more, they're less coarsely sensual and more kind of refined and intellectual, but they're still all sensuality. What was the Buddhist posture, breathing, form, plus anything just before enlightenment? The Buddhist posture was sitting lotus posture, cross-legged. Difference between Vipassana and Anapanasati. The, that's a big. I could do a whole talk on that. That's a very big topic. But the simplest way of expressing it is that with Anapanasati or any samatha meditation, one is trying to stabilize the mind on a single, arbitrarily chosen object. Like you sit down and say, "I'm going to experience the breath." That's Anapanasati, and one disregards everything else. Vipassana, there is no chosen object. The mind is trying to train itself to be clearly, sharply aware of each object that arises. Why are addiction to sense desire so painful? So many people are addicted to hard drugs nowadays. The mind seems to be separate and different from physical addictions. Yeah, well, there's a lot there. Addiction to drugs um, is it's tied up with sensuality because the drugs, at least initially, make the person feel good, but there's a bodily or physiological hook there as well, that the nervous system becomes habituated to that environment and actually feels considerable dukkha vedana when the drugs are withdrawn, because the organism has become habituated to that state. So that makes it uh, addiction to substances like that are particularly difficult. Do you feel that using a few drops of Angostura bitters, which contain alcohol, in food or cup of tea, counts as breaking fifth precept? Um, Actually, this is clearly uh, not a breach of the precept. This has been um, kind of clarified by the Vinaya masters that um, medicinal use of very small amounts of alcohol doesn't count as breaking the precept. I mean, if you're taking those kind of tinctures, the amount of alcohol you're consuming is minuscule. You know, it's less than a milliliter really. So it's only used as a vehicle for another medicine. That's the actual active ingredient. About the bowing from Arahant to seniors, isn't it in Guru Nikaya that the Buddha said to bow if other being has lower sila samadhi panya to you? Because it is hard to imagine Mahakasapa bowing to a being at central side just because he's senior to him. Um, no, the Buddha said, I see your correction. The Buddha said not to bow if other being is lower sila samadhi panya. No, I'd have to see that full context of that. I'm not aware of that, but I I'm quite sure that the formalities of the Sangha life of bowing and such is based only on seniority. It's uh, nothing to do with one's attainments. And maybe if a monk has such bad sila that he's actually parajika, he's not a monk anymore, then one should not bow to him. Um, I sometimes listen to talks while meditating. Is that a good, bad idea? Would silence be better? Well, that's two different practices. Listening to Dhamma, it's helpful to be in a meditative state of mind to let that come in. Um, I would not. I would not say it's a complete substitute for silent meditation, but it is a form of meditation. What kind of life forms are trees and plants? What kind of beings are they? Well, according to Abhidhamma, plants are classed as one faculty beings. It's said that they have life faculty but not consciousness. So they're not really conscious or sentient beings. But then we have, in contradiction to that, to some degree, we have the concept of tree devas, the Bhuma devas, that in some of the stories they seem to be not just living in the tree but associated with the tree. So it can really be taken in different ways. But the orthodox Abhidhamma position is that trees are not conscious and they're not sentient beings, so they have no karma. Weed is getting normalized. Are monks allowed to use medicinal marijuana? I would say no. It's not. I don't think that's something that we've really discussed much. Uh, there may be cases I could see. If it's prescribed for some specific reason, it may be possibly be allowable. I don't know. It would have to come up and be discussed. I know we're allowed to use painkillers as medicine in a situation where we've been injured or in a lot of pain. And do you have a recommendation for practicing metta bhavana free from sense objects? How would that be visualized? Well, I'm not sure I suppose in a way it is a very abstract form of sense desire, but the way I like to do metta is to visualize rays, like rose-colored rays emerging from the heart chakra and spreading out to all beings. Good evening from Lima, Peru. Okay. I spent a week at Plum Village with my family attending their summer retreat. That tradition talks quite a bit about interbeing and other concepts that seem foreign to Theravada thoughts. I'm not 100% sure what they mean by interbeing. I have heard that phrase used. It's definitely a Thich Nhat Hanh coining. Uh, it It's not. I don't think it's really so far into Theravada. It's possibly not foreign because it might just be a extension of the idea of dependent origination. That things depend on each other. Would you explain the benefits of deep forest living and how to not get eaten, please? Thank you. Okay. Well, if you were here in June, you would have got eaten little by little. We had a really bad year for mosquitoes this year. It's past. Um, well, the benefits of forest living, first of all, seclusion and harmony with nature. That's all very positive spiritual encouragement. There's a whole body of literature in Pali of praising the beauties of nature, which is a kind of, again, it's a kind of very refined sensuality. Enjoying the beauties of nature is a sensual experience, but amongst sensual experiences, it's the least harmful, because there's no sense of possession. If you're looking at a beautiful forest scene, you don't the thought doesn't occur, I want it to be mine, I want to own it. It's just, you just enjoy the beauty for its own sake. How to not get eaten. Well, there's plenty of cases in Thailand of monks who are advanced practitioners of metta who encounter tigers and things, and they just disarm them with metta. If you have enough metta, that these kind of animals are not going to hurt you. You said something about interesting about how the body becomes habituated to drugs and experiences dukkha waiting during withdrawal. Does the same thing happen at the end of romantic relationships? Um, it's more, in the case of a romantic relationship, it's more of a purely mental uh, addiction. It's not. I suppose you could make an argument that there's an addiction, a chemical addiction to dopamine, um, naturally occurring self-produced narcotic, but it's more of a purely mental attachment and mental suffering. So that doesn't mean it isn't experienced as real, but it's also should mean that with skill it's easier to get over. All these wars going on, are these people generating bad karma? Oh yes, there's a lot of bad karma being made in many places right now. Okay, I think I'm going to maybe just, I'll take this last one and then we'll call it here. I had the most sublime dream. I was back in the South American forest. There's a blinding white engulfed me. Premonition. Um, there's no way I could know that, whether it's a premonition or not. Uh, some dreams are premonitions. The Buddha said there's different kinds of dreams. Some dreams are visions of the future. Some dreams are visions of the past, meaning past lives. Some dreams are messages from devas, and some dreams are just noise. The phrase actually uses just wind in the belly. And I think that's probably most of our dreams are just nonsense. But something, the way you describe it, it sounds like it could be a significant dream. Um, but what exactly it's trying to tell you, you have to try and figure out the symbolism for yourself. Okay, so we'll end it there, and we'll talk again next week. Next week we'll deal with ill will.